How's it going, you guys? It's Scott with Everyday Home Repairs. There has been a few DIY electrical topics over the years that bring out a ton of comments, but they have people on both sides of the argument. So for a standard homeowner trying to understand electrical and do those projects safely, it can be a bit confusing. Specifically today, we're going to touch on a common topic of should ground be facing down or should ground be facing up in a standard residential installation of an outlet. Now, I did a video on this 3 years ago. It has over 1 million views and a ton of different comments from the audience. But in those 3 years, something has changed, which we need to consider to make sure we're still doing it appropriately and according to code. So first up, we'll do a demonstration, a safety demonstration that you should definitely not be trying at home. 2, I'll give you the feedback of my area and what I have been doing. 3, we'll look at thousands of people voting on the channel and what they say the orientation should be. And then 4, we'll touch on what is that new piece of information that has changed in the last 6 to 12 months that we need to take into consideration. So let's jump into it. So I want to do a demo here of why some people say ground facing down is unsafe. If I dropped a tool, a piece of metal, maybe a metal faceplate on a loose plug like this, it could connect between the hot and neutral and cause a short. Now, if we had ground facing up, that could create a safer scenario, but honestly, that would only be valid when we have a 3-prong plug where we have our ground conductor providing equipment ground to whatever we're plugging into. In that instance, the piece of metal would come down and then it would hit the ground first and not make contact between the hot and neutral prongs. But in the scenario as demonstrated with 2-prong plugs, which I would argue are becoming more and more common and popular because all the devices we're charging are 2-prong plugs, the scenario is the same. The safety issue is the same whether ground facing down like this or ground facing up. So although this is the most common feedback of why you would want ground facing up, that's only going to be relevant for 3-prong plugs, not 2-prong plugs. So number 2 is what I do as a DIYer working on these projects around my own house. Remember, I'm not a licensed electrician. I do ground facing down. That's my default scenario with residential electrical. And remember, this is after getting thousands and thousands of comments over the years on these videos on other people's opinions and what to consider. I still go with ground facing down. Now, the last point we'll talk about, maybe things are transitioning a little bit, but this is my default scenario. There is a scenario where ground facing up, I would use that, and that is if this outlet was a switched outlet. If half of the outlet, half of the duplex outlet could be controlled by a light switch on the wall, then I would put ground facing up to indicate that that is a switched outlet. That has been common in my area. I like that practice, and I know I've gotten that feedback from you guys as well in the past. One thing to take into account, and I've seen this in some of the properties I've had over the years, is I've had a ground facing up outlet in the room. I've had a light switch on the wall that seems to not do anything. That might be worth you checking out, because sometimes what happens is people will replace that outlet, but they will not know that that's a switched outlet, and they didn't know that they had to remove the tab that connects the 2 screw terminals on the hot side. If you want your duplex outlet to operate always on one side and switched on the other, you need to separate that connecting tab between the 2 screw terminals or it will not operate, and then you'll have a light switch that really doesn't do anything. So maybe something to investigate if you're having that issue at your own house. Now remember, we're talking residential. If you're talking commercial, industrial, getting into hospitals, it can be completely different, and the ground up, ground down is usually called out on the build specifications for that project itself. So that's my approach, but let's talk about the third item, and that is, what do you guys think? What is the feedback we're getting? I put a poll out, thousands of people have answered that poll. Let's see what the breakdown is in terms of how many people do ground facing up, how many people do ground facing down. So if you go over to Everyday Home Repairs, not many people know this, but there's these little polls that might pop up in your YouTube feed. Those polls over time, they're just on the community tab over in Everyday Home Repairs. And we have a ton of them that we've asked over the weeks, months, years, and you can vote on any of them and then see the results. Some will be just announcements on products off Amazon, but most of them, honestly, are those type of polls. So if you go back up to the top, the latest poll with almost 3,000 votes is just this. What do you prefer? Now, I did say prefer, I didn't say what is code, but this will give us an indication of what people are doing, and this is going to combine DIYers, professionals, and everybody in between. Now, you saw what I prefer, and I'm interacting as everyday solar, not everyday home repair, so I actually have to vote on this to get the results. Once I voted, then the results come up. So out of 3,000 people, where almost 9 out of 10 people say that they do ground down. Now, if you want additional information, this goes on these videos as well. There is a ton of good feedback and just different viewpoints, and you kind of take this all in, and you usually can make a very informed decision on your own projects. Now, if you want to get a lot of feedback to your own comment, usually you can do something like, I saw one earlier where somebody just said, ground up is code. If you say that, you're probably going to get a ton of different comments from the community wanting more information on that and maybe possibly disagreeing with you. But you'll see all those comments, and then you'll also see this over time. What I've seen is once we get about 1,000 or 2,000 votes, even if we go up to 10,000 votes, we're really going to stabilize. We might move up 1 or 2% up or down from here, but basically you could take 9 out of 10 people across the United States, into Canada a little bit, are going to go ground facing down. So last point, what is the thing that changed? NEC code, the 2023 update, does not call out that ground facing up or ground facing down or even a horizontal orientation is code. It leaves it wide open and lets you decide on what you want to do. And also don't forget, if you do have a call out on a print or a specification, you need to follow that. But really, it comes down to the manufacturer. NEC does say that you need to follow the manufacturer specifications when you're using outlets and light switches and other components. These are 2 boxes from the same outlet. It's a Legrand commercial grade outlet, just 2 different manufacturing dates. This one's actually a little bit older. This one's a little bit newer. I got these at the local home improvement store, Menards, and you can see the older one in the normal packaging, you can see ground is facing down. Now for the newer one, you see ground facing up, and this is becoming more and more common. I saw it a bit with Hubble over the years, and now with Legrand, when I go through the aisles, especially at Menards, I see almost all the different newer images on the boxes or just the actual outlets that you can see themselves are ground facing up. So the question is the manufacturer starting to quote unquote call that out? Do we need to start to follow that direction? If that's what they're showing us, also on their website, installed outlets, that's what they're showing us. Is that now the manufacturer's recommendation and we have to follow it? Bit of a question to you guys, and I want to hear your comments. So NEC isn't calling it out, but we're supposed to follow the directions from the manufacturer, and at least in Legrand's case, it looks like they're kind of taking a hard stance on ground facing up. I want your guys' feedback, and if you want to dive into another topic that kind of has people adamantly on both sides, check out this video right here, and it really addresses the question, do you need to be using electrical tape to wrap outlets and light switches once they're wired up? If you want to just dive into some basics and get a baseline or a foundation for DIY electrical, check out this video right here. We'll walk you through tools, common wiring methods, and how to get started if you want to take on your first electrical project. So thanks for joining me on this video, and we'll catch you on one of those next videos. Take care.